Hi there everyone. I wanted to make a quick video to demo a tool that I've been using that basically applies the renderer from Gaussian Splats to any input geometry. In this case, I'm working with a sphere, but it literally can be any input geometry as long as you've broken it down into a series of points. I'm going to take a quick walkthrough through this plugin, show you how to work with it on 3D forms as well as processing 2D video to sort of create an interesting aesthetic. So what we can see here in the top component is we have three inputs. We have color, rotation, and scale. So let's play with these real quick. If I turn down that color, we can see that that noise is affecting the color of those particles in the splat. Likewise with this rotation, although right now we're not going to see much impact from the rotation because the scale is just one size. So this one is just a mono image. But if I turn this on to RGB, the RGB is controlling the sizing of those splats. So with this rotation here, again, I can turn that up and down to increase how much we're sort of manipulating the effect as we move through that shape. And also likewise with this scale, I can go really big or really small. And already just with a few noise image inputs, we've been able to create something kind of interesting. In terms of the Gaussian renderer, what we have is we have a few things here. We have our color and rotation and scale lookups. So this just allows you to move around the sort of the color lookup on your input image. I haven't been super precise with this. I'm kind of just using this to just grab various parts of the image and just feed through a color and make changes that way. So you can control these XY coordinates for what that lookup is doing. We also have this lookup scale. So this is the classic Gaussian Splat lookup that we've kind of worked with before in the GS plugin, where we can change the scale of the splats. We can change the uniform scale. It's going to get really big. And we can also change the alpha threshold. So we could pull that up and have it looking much less diffuse and much harsher blobby lines. Let's bring that down. Let's bring that back down. One thing we can also see here is that I am animating this parameter. If we turn off that, then we are not moving through that lookup index. This is essentially moving through that lookup image. And what we could do instead is we could just animate this. So let's turn that up. Abs time dot seconds. You can slow it down a bit, maybe it's a bit fast. But then you can create some really interesting Gaussian-y patterns this way. The position input is down here, and this can be any 3D input. So right now I have a point generator that's set to sphere. I can flick that to box, rectangle, torus. Basically anything you like can be put in. I can also load in a 3D shape. Let's connect that up. I'm just going to bypass the noise there. And what I will say is that while you can load in any shape, objects that are bigger tend to perform better in this type of system. So I'm going to turn up that uniform scale to about 7. Control that zoom out. And then I can sort of tweak some parameters here. So I'm going to turn up this period so it's kind of high. For the color, for the rotation, I'll also move that to be a bit higher. I'll turn the period up. And for my noise scale here, let's tweak that until we have something that's a bit interesting, although that is maybe too lively. Let's turn that down. And then I can tweak these parameters here so I can turn up my Gaussian uniforms within reason for my system and sort of play with it. And so this basically allows you to apply this type of technique to any object or shape that you like and do sort of interesting things. I'm going to go back to that sphere. And leave it there. So that's the first system I wanted to show you. Just going to turn this off for the time being and show you the second system. And this system is very similar, except what it does is rather than apply that Gaussian effect to a 3D object, it's applying it to 2D image and video content. So we can see here we have a noise image that's fed in, and that image is basically controlling the rotation of all those Gaussian splats and the scale as well. If I animate that, we'll see that kind of in a real-time process. But what we can also do is we can feed in any kind of image or video. So let's try a video device in, and we can see me, and I'll show you how to work with this. I'm feeding this directly into a fit, and so that's cropping. And what we can see here is we have the crop, and it's not quite showing up fully in my Gaussian renderer. And in the controls here, we have a few things. So the first thing that's useful, and it's not particularly well labeled, but in a future update, I'll sort of label this more precisely. We have this size. So this size parameter basically is how much cropping we're doing on the underlying image. So let's expand that. We also have things here like this value, which is how much the underlying image pixels are altering those Gaussians. We can also control things like the columns and rows in our grid, so we can make things sort of weird, but I'm going to stick at 100 by 100. On top of that, we have things like our color lookup offset, so you can move things up and down as you like. So you can kind of scale things and move things around. You could even animate things to sort of zip around the screen. And then that will just do a sort of continuous loop, but we don't really want that. But this is sort of these are some of the capabilities that you can access with this tool. Again, we have our uniform scale, so turning this up or down controls the Gaussian. And we have our splat size, which does a similar thing. So you can get something very diffuse, as well as our alpha threshold, where we can make things a bit more sharp on those edges. Another parameter we have is this number of points. So this is really what defines how many points we are drawing. And rather than having it on a set grid, I wanted to put it on a more sort of randomized position, because I found if I presented these Gaussian effects on a very regular grid, it didn't have quite the same effect as having something where the positioning is a little bit more random. So we're going to move this up. I think the limit here is 10,000, but you can actually just type in whatever you want. So you can control the density of points in your Gaussian as well with this number of points. So we can turn down that splat size. Could even go up to 100,000, and then you have something that's maybe more pointillistic that you could animate and use on some of your content. Let's see how that looks on noise. Running a bit slow. Let's turn down that value. There we go. And even though it is a 2D method of rendering these images and videos, we can also see a little bit of depth as that parameter rotates outwards from the image itself. And this can be an effect that is really nice. And obviously this is all set up to the camera viewport, so we can control that in our panel with our regular controls. So this is going to be up on my Patreon and available for download. I hope you enjoy playing with this. Over the next few weeks, I'll be making some updates, but this will allow you to get involved with Gaussian splat rendering and adding that into your projects.